I wasn't ready, but I hope you're going to be communication ready and that you're ready for our second part of our communication across the school day, which is talking about strategies to create communication opportunities. I hope you'll have fun and be ready to connect and communicate with your students. Our first strategy is to provide opportunities for your students to make choices. When you give choices, you are modeling for the student. Being allowed to make choices also fosters the skill of requesting. By providing choices and being an honest broker of what the student chooses, we give the student the right to be given real choices and the right to ask for what they want and the right to share their feelings of no, no thank you, I don't want any. So, some basic things to remember about choices are: be an honest broker. If you offer the choices, make sure you can make good on them. Give the child at least two choices you can live with. Make sure they are both available to him or her. You don't want to offer him gummy bears and McDonald's hamburgers if you don't have the hamburgers available. Remember to ask questions beyond a yes or no answer. Those types of questions don't force the child to answer beyond just a head nod. It also limits the vocabulary you are modeling. Try to shoot for more than just food or objects. Remember, there are lots of choices you make for students during the day, so give them the opportunity to choose. This helps build the skills, requesting, and independence. Some examples might be, let them decide a partner they want to work with. Do you want to play with Jenna or do you want to play with Marcus? Or let them choose someone to sit beside. You can sit by me or you can sit by Alyssa. Give them the choice of who will help them. Who do you want to help you? Miss Margie or Miss Stephanie? And what to do next. What do you want to do now? Math center or listening center? Or where to put something. You can put it on the table or you can put it in my bag. Or someone to give something. You can give it to me or you can give it to Miss Susan. Or how to move something. Should we fly it like a plane up and down? Should we hop over or should we dance over? Should we put something on a table or put it on the floor? So lots of choices that you can support. And one way to do that is to provide visuals or even objects or a speech generating device. In this slide, you can see there's a tray with different foods that the student can choose from. In the middle slide, those are question strips that might support students who are shy, struggling with memory, or who benefit from having a picture as a reminder. And then here is a switch where the student can ask for either chicken nuggets or a hamburger. The next strategy is to be communication ready. In order for the student to make a choice, he has to have something to choose or some way to tell you what he chooses. In the picture above, where the choices are a donut and an apple, a student could reach out and choose and let you know what he wants. But not all kiddos can reach out to get the apple or even say, I want the apple. So we have to give them some way to let us know. To be communication ready means that you have provided the student a way or a means to communicate. It might not be his primary one that he uses all the time, but he or she is able to communicate with you through some means. Maybe it's a visual picture, We rely on visual supports a lot because, after all, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But visual supports are also an evidence-based strategy for students with autism and many other students with disabilities. Easterseals talks about visual supports a lot. The reason we talk about it a lot is because it works. Most adults rely on visuals too. When I go to the store, I write down the things I need on my list as a visual reminder. We use visual reminders to tell us where to go and what time to be there. We call it a calendar. Some of us call it Google Maps. Some students use visual schedules to help them know where to go next. We can also use visuals with students who need support expanding their vocabulary. Speech pathologists might know this as the mean length of utterance. When a student says, "I want a Skittle," we can use a visual to force him to choose a color so that he says, "I want red Skittle." He might not have used that adjective red if we didn't make him choose. So again, the choice and the visual supports are both important. You need to be communication ready. Your classroom needs to be communication ready to supply that student with what he or she needs to communicate his or her response to you. How can you be ready and meet the right of that student to have his communication system available to him at all times? By being communication ready. So, in the two pictures on the left, various communication options are ready when the students get to the table. You can see there's 3 different core boards here that students can use. They may have been printed from their AAC device or the speech pathologist iPad or computer. The photo on the right shows a teacher using a giant core vocabulary board to ask a student a question. She could also use this if a student needed to answer a question. She could model for a student who has this particular system to show him how she is saying what she's saying on his device. That's called aided language input, or some people call it demonstration or modeling. The picture in the middle is a show and go or a flip card. Having one of those at all times is one way to be communication ready. The teacher or student can carry it. Some people put them on a lanyard or a name badge holder that has an extendable cord. The last picture here is showing 3 or 4 different devices and a couple of switches, as well as a low-tech flip book that could be used with a student. Ways to help support communication and being communication ready. Be prepared, plan ahead. You can't just wing it with these complex communicators. Look at the activities of your day and determine what you're going to need to communicate. Use an implementation plan or a planning document to help with that. We've given you some examples and resources at the end of these slides. You can also collaborate with your speech pathologist to see what she has in mind as well. Use multiple options for communication. Don't get stuck in the rut that you feel like you have to use a kid's device, even if it's not charged. Plan for those moments. Have a backup printed copy of his communication pages. Have a switch handy that you can program easily, or a Go Talk. It can be low tech, it can be high tech, just something for that student to communicate. Model using the student's communication language or device. Like I said earlier, the speechy term for this is called aided language input. There's research that has shown this to be very effective in teaching core vocabulary to kiddos. I think it also allows for verbal communicators to have some perspective on how difficult it can be for those who are nonverbal to communicate using a different language or symbol system. So be communication ready. Our next strategy is repetition. Rhyme, rhythm, and repetition are powerful tools for creating a language-rich environment. Repetition is a key learning aid because it helps transition a skill from the conscious to the subconscious. Through repetition, a skill is practiced and rehearsed over time, and it gradually becomes easier. Repetition supports brain development. A child's brain is especially active in his younger years and is wired to receive large amounts of new information. The more often that information is repeated, the more likely it is to be retained. Ways that we can support repetition in the classroom are by using books with repetitive lines like brown bear, what do you see? And focusing on things like what and see as core vocabulary words. You can also use things that have predictive endings, allowing students to be ready to fill in the blank, whether it is with their augmentative communication device, whether they verbally say it, or they hold up a picture. For older kiddos, you can help them create books on Tar Heel Reader. That's TARHEEL Reader. When you create and adapt these books for older kiddos, you can set the level, you can adapt the level, but still make it interesting to them and can repeat the storylines. Teaching games that are familiar to peers and combining with the visual support to act as the script for the game is another way to use repetition in your classroom. Things like playing Go Fish. You can use a strip for the student to say, give me all your twos, or have it on a card. You could print a card that says, go fish, my turn, your turn. There are all kinds of games like that we can support our students by practicing that repetition. The next strategy is prompting to support communication. Though prompts are very useful in teaching a new concept and working on the use of it, it is also important to use prompts very carefully. Students can become dependent on prompts and have difficulty initiating and seek out an adult or a partner's help before they even attempt to make any type of response. It's important that we plan how to fade our prompting out. Using prompts to support our student, not supplant or replace their skills, is one way we're developing that productive struggle and, again, building independence. Prompting may require two people initially, one to be the communication partner and one to be the prompter. Communication partners must learn to model, then wait, then prompt, and then respond. Individualize the level of the prompt to the student's needs, as well as to the activity and the skill you are targeting. Some students will need a nudge, and some students will need hand over hand. Prompting hierarchy refers to the order and different levels of support that can be used to help the student give the appropriate responses. Remember, as you decide the type of prompts, You also need to think of ways to fade prompts over time. This slide shows a model of a prompting hierarchy. We tend to talk about prompts being intrusive or dependent, as well as how difficult a prompt is to fade. In this model, physical prompts are considered the most intrusive and dependent, while verbal prompts are considered the hardest to fade. Learning to plan for the prompt levels and preparing on how you will fade those prompts is important to building more independent communicators. This is another model of prompts used with AAC and with communication. Again, we look at what is most and least intrusive or dependent and what is difficult to fade. While using each prompt, it is most important to give an expectant pause and wait for the user's response. The wait time can vary from 5 to 15 seconds for the student to produce the expected response. When you say something, wait for a response. If the user says something, then you respond and move on. If not, give the next prompt in the hierarchy. And again, wait for the response. If you don't use enough wait time, you may be providing more prompts than needed. Remember, rushing through prompts essentially takes away opportunities for the user to respond. Our next strategy is limiting access. This is my favorite. Restricting access allows more opportunities for requesting, and it is one way to teach gaining another's attention. Don't give students access to their favorite reinforcers or favorite toys all the time. This little guy would have been content to eat all his Doritos in one bite. But when access was limited, he slowed down and made eye contact with his communication partner, who is also his aunt, Rebecca. Limiting access teaches help and more, both core vocabulary words that students can use across multiple settings, not only in the classroom. One thing you can do is to put items out of reach, but unlike this picture, not in a place where they can climb, where students climb up and hurt themselves. You can also use a container that has a lid, or put things in a cabinet where the student can't see those items, and then open the lid or cabinet when it is time for that student to request. Another idea is to hold pieces back to a game or a toy so the student has to ask for it. For example, if you're playing Legos, you can hold the red bricks out and they have to ask for a red piece. Another way to limit access is to plan ways to sabotage a situation so that something unexpected occurs. Turning over a chair or just removing a chair so the student has to ask, "Where's my chair?" Or plan barriers. Take something away that is usually there. Surprise! Encourage students to ask for help. Beware of those independent students that think it is easier to take care of the problem themselves rather than ask for help. Hi, it's me again. I hope you learned a lot of different ways to create opportunities for communication in your classroom. I know you learned about providing choices for your students. You learned about being communication ready at all times. And you also learned about how repetition can help build a language-rich environment. And the last thing is, I hope you learn to have some fun using that limiting access strategy and sabotage. I hope you'll join me later to talk about planning for this and how to input it into our day and some of our routines and activities.